My name is Julia Foster. I'm 32, a data analyst living in Orlando, Florida, and until that autumn evening I thought the past I'd crawled out of was finally behind me. I'd built a life that felt steady, a modern apartment, a career that respected my work, and a quiet ritual of sending my father, David Foster, age 58, a $500 check each month to help with the diner he'd run for decades. David's hands still show the flour and grease of long shifts. He's the solid center of my life. My mother, Marie Stone, age 54, left when I was 9. She walked away with a suitcase and never truly returned. The only other person tied to that fracture is my half-brother, Caleb Grant, age 18, who Marie raised after remarrying. They re-entered my life with a knock on my door and a list of demands that could have been lifted straight from a stranger's script. That night the knock sounded ordinary. I opened the door to a woman who looked startlingly like the woman in my childhood photographs. Marie's smile as practiced as a smooth lipstick line. Beside her slouched Caleb, a college freshman who rolled his eyes at the world and propped his feet on my coffee table as if the place belonged to him. Their arrival felt rehearsed, their words a mix of honey and accusation. Marie's voice cooed about how proud she was, and then slid into numbers. Tuition, rent, monthly support. The math was obscene. $60,000 for school, $3,000 a month to keep things afloat. In a single afternoon, the life I'd built from long nights and scholarships was suddenly a ledger someone else assumed I owed them. As I stood there, every instinct wound tight between disbelief and the sharp, old ache of abandonment. I remembered nights in Ohio when the fridge was empty and Dad returned from the diner with the hesitant smile of a man trying to be brave. I remembered carrying bills to the mailbox with small, calloused hands. I remembered a 9-year-old who promised silently to be enough for 2. That promise is why I do what I do now. But I also remember the hollow of waiting for a call that never came. Seeing Marie's practice concern flip so fast into entitlement exposed a truth I'd long suspected. People who leave rarely return to repair. They return to collect. I let them sit. I let the words land like coins. I asked the basic question, "How did you find me?" Marie deflected, claiming friends, chance, the universe. Caleb smirked and compared my apartment to what he deserved. The slow, tight anger that rose in my chest felt foreign. So did the old, familiar ache. The door between me and the life I'd outgrown cracked open, and I had to decide, reclaim it or shut it for good. From the first line of lights and the knock on my door, the story became clear. This was not a reunion. It was a test. And tests have a way of asking what I value most: family, truth, or the quiet justice of self-preservation. When I was 13, I started taking jobs so the diner could keep its doors open. I delivered newspapers at dawn, stocked shelves after school, and scrubbed other people's kitchens at night. Those years taught me to read ledgers and read people. I learned that generosity without reciprocity is dangerous, and that loyalty divorced from respect becomes a chain. My father, David Foster, sacrificed without complaint. He taught me math problems at the kitchen table with a tired smile. He taught me that you build things with small steady acts, a shift, a scholarship application, a late-night study session. Those lessons became the architecture of my life. They also taught me boundaries, not because he lectured me about them, but because I saw the damage of their absence. So when Marie and Caleb pushed for money in that cafe, for cars, for phones, for tuition with an audacity I could hardly process, I felt the old protection reflex for Dad flare up. I listened as Marie rewrote history, placing blame on my father as if his exhaustion had been malice. She painted herself as a wounded woman, a wanderer who had been shut out. The truth I knew was quieter and uglier. She chose another path. She chose comfort, and she left. I let her speak, watched her tilt the conversation, and felt the pity in other people's glances around the cafe like a physical thing. Caleb tossed insults like change. "You're loaded, Julia," he said, as if my salary were a moral failing. I tasted anger and grief and something sterner, refusal. Back home I discovered them rifling through my things. Caleb had opened my laptop, eyes flicking over sensitive information. A forwarded message from my father's email, which Marie had accessed, confirmed the worst. She'd relished in hunting down the life I'd built. To see my dad's trust used as a key to my life burned. That betrayal reawakened a child's wound. I felt the impulse to protect Dad as if he were still a small, tired man at the diner counter. Instead, I took a rational step. I locked accounts, changed passwords, and called the police when threats turned to trespass. There were legal steps and emotional steps. Both were necessary. But the confrontation was also a mirror. As I stood firm, I realized fury and pity could coexist. I felt anger at Marie's greed, but I also felt something like sorrow, for a woman who had misplaced her priorities, for a boy named Caleb who would equate love with entitlement. Setting boundaries felt less like punishment and more like teaching. I would not fund a life built on entitlement. I would not be a bank for people who abandoned me. In the weeks after, I visited Dad more, sat in his diner and listened to the small conversations of a life kept honest by labor. I sent more than money. I sent presence. The moral line blurred into a lesson. Family is obligation when it comes from care. It becomes theft when it arrives as demand. What I owed my past was not financial repayment but the preservation of dignity, mine and my father's. The most dangerous thing about family secrets is their ability to masquerade as truth. Marie's smile, her careful phrases, the way she spoke about Dad, all constructs meant to sway me. But something else was happening under the surface. I began to see patterns, the same way I interpret data for a living. Small anomalies matter. A forwarded email, a rushed explanation, a reluctance to meet in private. These were outliers that pointed to a pattern of manipulation. I started tracking timelines. When Marie moved, who she called, what changed between the card she sent and the silence she kept. The picture that emerged didn't absolve the past, it explained intentions. One night, a call from Dad changed everything. He was quiet, then angry, then broken in a way I hadn't heard since I was a child. He told me he'd seen charges on the diner's account. Small transfers, odd messages, people asking questions about me. His voice trembled with betrayal at being used. That tremor became a pivot point. I realized Marie had weaponized our family's history to gain access to more than money. She sought control. She'd leveraged my father's trust and my own yearning for connection. The revelation felt like someone lifting a veil. I took my analytic skills beyond spreadsheets. I traced messages, recorded conversations when necessary, and rebuilt a timeline that showed intent. It culminated on a rain-thin evening when Caleb demanded keys to my car and Marie insisted I wire funds immediately. I refused. I told them calmly I would not be coerced. Caleb's face changed, a boy becoming a stranger. He threatened to report me to his father, to ruin relationships if I didn't comply. That was the moment I stopped bargaining for their affection and started protecting my life. I recorded the threats, documented the intrusion, and presented the facts when their performance soured into coercion. Legally and emotionally, it was the right move. The law doesn't heal all wounds, but it draws lines that misuse cannot cross. In the aftermath, people judged me, some called me cold, others praised my firmness. I sat with the complexity. I mourned the mother I never had and the brother I'd wanted. I also recognized strength, the ability to see through manipulation, to act with clarity, and to preserve one's own well-being. I found a strange peace in that balance. The turning point wasn't only in stopping them, it was in reclaiming my narrative. For years I'd been reacting to a past. Now I was choosing future steps on my own terms. This is the part of the story where the protagonist stops being defined by abandonment and starts authoring a life rooted in respect, for herself and for the hard-earned dignity of the father who never left. Resolution rarely looks like a tidy reconciliation. For me it arrived in incremental acts, a lawyer's letter that deterred further intrusion, a mediated meeting where boundaries were recorded and enforced, a renewed rhythm of visits to my father's diner where the scent of coffee was a comfort rather than a reminder of scarcity. I did not forgive Marie in a way that erased harm. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would be a private thing that followed accountability. What I did choose was repair in its truest sense, repairing my relationship with Dad, repairing the way I allowed people into my life, repairing the narrative I'd told myself about what family must always mean. Caleb remained a figure on the periphery for a while, a young man whose entitlement became his own barrier. I tried, privately, to show him another way. A job application, a recommendation for a scholarship, an invitation to work at the diner and learn humility alongside responsibility. Some offers he accepted, some he didn't. The important thing was that I stopped funding behavior and started offering paths to change. Marie's presence dwindled officially when she realized my refusal was not a negotiation. She left, again, but this time with less power to harm. The final act was quiet, a letter from Dad that read like a benediction. He thanked me not for the money, but for the life I'd built for myself, for the steadiness I'd given him in return. His pride felt like the truest wealth. The moral of my story is not a single line but a practice. Boundaries are an expression of love for yourself and for others. They're not vindictive walls but maps that keep people from getting lost inside you. Generosity that endures is given freely and reciprocated in respect. Generosity extracted by guilt is theft, no matter what blood ties justify it. And finally, trauma does not have to become destiny. My childhood hunger, literal and emotional, taught me resilience. It also taught me to choose what I would carry forward. I chose dignity. So if you find your past knocking at your door with a shopping list for your present, listen closely, to the tone, the timing, the pattern. Protect what you have earned. Protect the people who earned it with you. And remember, kindness without boundaries is a kindness to everyone but yourself. In the end, I kept my heart open enough to care for my father and closed enough to keep my life intact. That balance, not revenge, not blind forgiveness, but clear, stern love, is the lesson I carry forward.